As you know, I'm Kathryn Williams, founder of KMint Finance and Pricing Consultancy. For over 30 years in agency land, I have worked with agencies of all sizes around the globe, helping them improve the financial side of running the business. And I do this through my Show Me the Money Mentor program, my CFO consultancy, keynotes, workshops, how-to books, and webinars, which deliver bite-sized nuggets of agency intel. Now, today's webinar, Break the Brief and 10x Your Business, will show you how to think your better process and outcomes for your clients, and also create a compensation model so you take a share through value-based billing. And I have invited one of our industry's strategic thinkers to join me in discussing this very popular topic. Please welcome Nicola Mansfield, Chief Thinker at TheDesignThinkers.
Thank you so much, Kathryn. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here with you today. I guess I'm here because my career has certainly taken some unusual chapters over the years. I started life as a graphic designer. I've been a creative director, a strategy director, and a managing director. And I've done that in agencies. I've done that at client side. I've been into management consulting, and I've started my own businesses. I've had the opportunity to work with some really big names over that time. Wolf Ollens in the UK. I've worked for Deloitte in Australia. I've worked with Deloitte, and most recently at Interbrand. So I'm deeply passionate about the conditions that are best for creativity, and I want the creatives in the room to not be the poorest paid profession. I've had the opportunity to shape, form, or reframe creative offerings on 7 different occasions over that career. So I think we've got some really great learnings between Kathryn and myself here today to hopefully get you into a really exciting place for the next year. Oh, I think you're on mute, Kathryn. There we go.
Apologies, I'm getting all my gear ready here. So I'd like us to work through today in our webinar 4 areas, which will be then followed by a Q&A. So we're going to work through the issue that we currently have with value pricing in our industry, the solution, let's take a look at what it could look like, a model, how would you start to create that, and give you a plan to actually work through this. So Nicola, tell us a little bit about, I guess, 2020 and COVID.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, as we all know, and we've probably all grown a little tired of saying this, everything changed last year. And I think it's great that we all acknowledge that. But the genuine question I've been asking myself is, what have we done about it? Fundamentally, the way customers think, the way they buy, the services that they're buying, the brands they're buying from, everything has been reframed. And yet here we are, shopping the same products and services that we were selling in 2019. If the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, then what we really need to do this year is take stock of what we're offering our clients, how we're working with them, and then that gives us the opportunity to really think about how we're remunerating ourselves. Just before we get into the content, we will leave plenty of time. We're hoping to leave a good 10-15 minutes at the end to have a good, healthy discussion from questions and answers. So we ask that you use the chat field, and we will have a look at those when we've finished the webinar today. So jumping into what we see as the issue, it's twofold. Fundamentally, we know that we've got some real challenges in the kinds of briefs we're receiving from our clients. And we also think that the way we're being remunerated is creating challenges for us. So let's start with that question around the briefs and the challenges that we're facing there. Fundamentally, the brief should be absolutely nothing more than a client's articulation of the problems that they are experiencing. But we know too often that the client leaps ahead of that and they jump to solution. They tell us what the solution needs to be. Now, there's a few problems with that, and I'm going to step through those. The first is that it's very hard when they are the master and you are the servant to do anything more than execute. And if you are simply executing, it's very easy to be commoditized. Somebody else is going to undercut your fee. And it's hard to add value when you are in a pure executional capacity. But that's not the only challenge. Let's think about the fact the client has jumped to solution, and they've done that without the creatives in the room. They have an internal view of their business. You bring objectivity, but they've not asked you what you think the solution should be. As well as that, you've got the creative flair. That's why they're paying you, but they haven't engaged you in that solution. Furthermore, whilst they may have deep knowledge of their sector, they don't really know what's going on in the ancillary sectors. And very often it's that kind of disruptive thinking that is going to move the dial in their sector, but they've not looked there. And finally, they may not really understand what it is that their customers want. They may not have the right degree of insights to really be in a position to determine the right solution. So all of that leaves a whole series of issues. Unfortunately, that's not the worst of it. They've got the approval to spend this budget with you from a decision maker who has already been told what they're going to get. The decision maker is not bought into a process of possibility. The decision maker is expecting a finite output. So it doesn't matter how amazing your thinking is going to be. Having access to that decision maker and getting them to shift their thinking is almost impossible. Now, when we think about that array of challenges, the commoditization of being an executional service, when we think about the challenges of having the problem solved without your engagement, when we think about the fact that the decision maker isn't open, there's very little space left for you to add real value. The problem with that is the client then looks at the situation and says, you know what, I can probably do this myself for cheaper and faster. And so then you get the rise of the internal team because you're not being allowed to add value. When the Association of National Advertisers asked the question of its member base who had an internal function, the answer in 2013 was 34%. A mere 6 years later, in 2019, the answer was 75%. So if there's anything in all of this that tells us that the way we're working with our clients is not working for our clients, we might assume it's the rise of the internal team. So let's now jump forward to the second part of this problem, which is around how we're being remunerated. Now, let's assume we've got the best kind of brief, not the executional brief where we're being told what the deliverable is. Let's assume there's a more open space for us to actually work with the client to help define the solution. Fantastic. But there's a problem. You need to provide your client with an estimate about how much this solution is going to cost them. That means you are now jumping to solution. You need to have a deliverable in mind in order to cost the amount of time it's going to take you. You put your estimate for said assumption on the table to the client and they say, you know what, 2020 was a tough year. I'm afraid I've only got 75% of that. Now you've taken your assumption of the solution and you've reduced it. So you have now set constraints for yourself. You have a reduced number of hours than you were hoping for to produce a deliverable that you don't yet know what it is. And we call it an estimate, but when we go back to the client and say the solution is actually going to take longer, the answer is going to be, we don't have any more budget. And so there you are with the constraint imposed. Now, I think you get going, you've got a blank canvas, and you start really digging into the solution and the creative team is getting so excited by the potential. And yet you find yourself saying to them, guys, you're on 80%, you're on 90%, pens down, you're on 100, you've exhausted your allocation, but they're not done, or they're not done to the degree they want to be done. Simultaneously, while you've been solving this problem with the client, they've got a sense of some thinking that's around the edges of your assumed scope that you included in your proposal. And they want a little piece of that. But now you've got to manage their expectations. I'm sorry, we've agreed that we're going to deliver X. That deliverable is not included. If you would like to find more budget, and we all know what the answer is going to be. Sorry, we don't have any budget. So you've got a solution for the client, but is it as good as it could have been? The creatives will tell you no, they wish they'd had longer. And the client really would have liked to see more of some of the other stuff that you began to uncover, but they didn't have the money. perhaps it's a mediocre solution. So those are the two challenges, the two issues that we've defined. It's around the brief, an executional brief specifically, and in the event that we have a more open brief, which is what we're all hoping for, how are we actually going to assume to know how long a solution is going to take when we don't know what that solution yet is? So what are we going to do about it? Let's jump forward to what we think is the solution to this problem that I've just outlined. Definitely, it's around a consultative mindset and value-based billing. I'm going to step through both of those. Let's start with a consultative mindset. Fundamentally, that means getting comfortable with the problem. We really do jump to solution. We get an idea and we stick with it. But we've not spent long enough with the problem, and that's what you need to do. You need to look at it from every angle. You need to speak to everyone around it. You need to ask every kind of question that you can think of. You need to actively listen to the answers. What you're doing is unlearning what you thought you knew about the solution to what is sometimes an age-old problem. You want to start from scratch every time and really try to find something new, a better, smarter way of solving that problem. You're unlearning what you know. I sometimes call it a 2-year-old mode, when you're constantly saying to your client, but why, but why? There's an innocence in that that leads to new thinking, and that's what you need to tap into. When you're doing that with your clients, they're learning as well as you are. Invariably, there will be things that they have just always assumed is the way it needs to be. And when you start digging into why that is the case, very often they can't actually answer the question. And suddenly you've removed an obstacle and you've opened the frame even wider for what the solution here could be. When you declutter the client's context, when you move away those sacred cows, they love you for that. It is one of the most rewarding experiences that you can ever have with a client. And they're learning with you. They're then working on different options to the problem, and they're authoring it. And I always say that authorship is ownership. So now the client is deeply invested in the solution that you believe in, that they believe in, and they're going to fight for that as it goes through the various layers of bureaucracy to actually get approval. You really are working as a team. So that's where we want to get to. We call it design thinking. Now, you'll hear that term and you hear it being used in all sorts of contexts. For me, design thinking is very simply natural curiosity. And as creatives, we have it in abundance. It is your superpower to being able to solve problems in innovative ways if you give yourself the opportunity to do so. So let's now think about the next part of that solution, which is around how you're thinking around remunerating yourself. Instead of measuring the hours it's going to take, the input, start to think in terms of the value you're creating for your client, the impact, because that's what they're invested in. You should be invested in that growth as well. Scopen surveyed clients in the UK and asked what contribution they felt their agency was making to the growth. The answers were phenomenal. Clients believe that their agencies are contributing to up to 50% of their growth. That's enormous. When you think about what the standard rules of thumb are for developing a marketing budget for an initiative, you start at 5% of gross revenue. For a new entrant, you might need to spend a little bit more, maybe up to 15%. But however we look at that, we're being paid peanuts in terms of the growth that we're creating for the clients. So that's what we want to challenge thinking on here. Let's think more about the impact and let's find ways to take a share of that growth, because the more invested we are in their growth, the better the work is going to be. The more invested they are in our part of that solution, the more closely they're going to work with us. And this can become quite a radical solution. When you've got skin in the game, you might start to think about rewarding your teams, not for the number of hours that they're sitting at their desk, but for the quality of the thinking that they're bringing to the table. And absolutely, for the impact that thinking is creating for your clients, you end up with a beautiful symbiosis where everybody is working towards growth. And that is how we absolutely can make more of a difference for our clients. Coming all the way back to the initial question, that is absolutely how we can add value to what we're delivering for our clients. So how are we actually going to get there? Because for sure, everybody's sitting there saying, yes, please, I'll have a piece of that. So definitely the solution is to start small. This is very much a new process. It's new for you and it's new for your clients. So you want to find a client who absolutely trusts the quality of your thinking, and you have to trust theirs, because trust is absolutely critical in design thinking. You want to ensure that whatever it is you're going to be delivering can be measured, because you need to measure the growth you're creating. That's how you're going to be remunerated. As we said, you absolutely need to be able to co-create that solution with your client. Understand the implications for your budgets. Sometimes you're not going to see the results until the end of the program of work. So that's going to mean a delayed payment terms. So how are you going to pay the rent and keep the lights on and keep your head count there in the meantime? You've got to think about that. Secondly, what's the implications for the client? They usually pay you out of OPEX. Now you're talking about taking a cut of CAPEX. So you need to be really clear that this isn't going to leave them short or some other master short in the end term. Then you've achieved your results and you measure again. And now you've already able to apply the formula you agreed. And Kathryn's going to talk about that more in a moment. So this is really big thinking. This is the way that venture funds think. This is the way investment bankers think. Now you are thinking exponentially. We're not talking about just being remunerated for the number of hours we're applying. We're talking about being remunerated for the impact that we create. That's exciting. The great thing about this is you take every brief and you absolutely maximize the potential that exists there for the client. The great news about this is you're now a creative partner. You're just not an executional supplier. The great news about this is that your team is going to be completely liberated to really apply quality of thinking and effort, and they're going to get more out of it. The great news about this is you've earned money exponentially. And all of that said, not a single person has asked you for your timesheet. Wouldn't that be great? Over to you, Kathryn.
I love that, Nicola. I think everybody watching today too will also love that we don't have to do timesheets. A lot of what Nicola has just spoken about, I feel and hear, and I respond to agency inquiry in this space regularly, particularly on the timesheets, and value-based pricing doesn't require timesheets because it is no longer about that conflict of interest between how much time it takes to deliver an impact, as we heard from the stats from Nicola, maybe 50% growth at the client's end. Really important. So I'm going to start talking through how do we build a model. There was something else that Nicola said that I made a little note as we were going, which was get your team involved here, give some skin in the game, reward them for this exponential growth. We're talking about moving business growth from your client's perspective. So knowing where the client is expecting a result from the work you deliver, and anything over and above that, that incremental value, if the agency can take a share in that, then it could be cascaded down and shared with your team. So everybody involved here is incentivized. And I think this is why I love speaking so much to creative agencies, because you guys own the business. Most of you attending the webinar today are owners of business or senior players. And in the mini questionnaire joining the webinar, you do have clout in making decisions around the pricing models. So it's really up to you to figure out your own way, bespoke way. And I guess this is number one in my 3 steps of the model, the framework. What is the framework that you would like for your agency? And it's going to be different for every agency. Again, picking up on some of Nicola's aspect of the design thinking, creatives don't want cookie cut solutions. Now, you're going to design your own model. In my position, though, as the finance lens and the got it 1 + 1 = 2, it has to, that's fact. I need a framework that's going to be, I guess, the starting place for you to work through, and I need milestones and accountabilities. Now, your clients also need that, and behind them, their stakeholders, their CEO, their CFO, their shareholders need that accountability as well. So the next few slides, I'm going to walk you through a 3-step simple process. Let's develop a framework so we can assess performance. Let's get some performance metrics, and let's prepare a pricing model, a bespoke agency value-based pricing proposition that you can roll out to a client. And as Nicola said, let's start small. We're going to pick a client that knows us well, that can see that this is going to be a partnership where you can talk to them about financial sensitive data and improvement at their end, and that is happy to go on this particular project with you. You're still probably going to offer them the hourly rate as one of the 2 or 3 pricing options that you will present. But we're going to encourage you to consider that you're offering a value-based pricing, a VBP proposition as well. So what does it look like? Now, it doesn't look like anything. It could just look like donuts. It just could look like anything. You don't want it to be boring. You want it to reflect your agency's DNA. And I'd like to start by asking you, who would it be in your organisation that is going to own this? Who's going to develop the model? Who's going to build this framework? Who's going to train your team? Who's going to work with you and integrate, liaise with client? And who's going to refine and improve it and repeat it at the end? You'll need to be, it could be you, it could be somebody on your team, or maybe there's a couple of different people. Someone might be particularly good on your team at building the framework. Someone might be really great at being able to give you the value creation possibilities in those success criteria metrics, marketing and finance. You probably will need a finance person that can help you develop the compensation model. And maybe you need somebody that can help you implement it to put the proposition across to the client or be with you to support you. Just as the client might bring their procurement people into the mix, you might also bring this key person in to help you roll this out. So that's your first step. Let's define who it is, decide internally who's going to own this, who's going to champion it, and then let's move forward to start looking at, well, what does performance mean? So there are actually 2 key standards to measure performance, success and impact of the client's business. One is creative effectiveness and the other is financial value. Now, both of these we need to build with confidence so that your client counterpart, but also remember behind them, their CFO, their CEO, whatever the vocab is that they use, we need to apply that and align our framework and the way we speak internally with the way they speak about their business goals. So let's take a look at creative effectiveness as the first area. Now, I know many of you love this topic, but also hate this topic because it is so subjective. There is no cookie cutter answer. But luckily, again, many of you will know, and if you don't, let me tell you, our industry has spent many years grappling over this and analysing. And we have very clever white papers and metrics and models that we can use that will show us that creativity equals business value. Papers and reports developed by businesses and organisations like IPA, Cannes Lions, McKinsey Management Consultants, all of them agree that impact and business growth can be delivered and measured from the creative perspective. So let's take a look. IPA. So IPA is the British Institute of Practitioners in Advertising. It has 12 industry associations, 20 advisory board members and leading academics. Can you imagine them all sitting around a big table somewhere in some massive, or maybe not right now, but in London, they'll be socially distanced. They focus on evidence-based effectiveness, and they've produced a number of analytical reports and guidelines about assessing creativity. So you've probably heard of a few of these anyways, by Peter Field and Les Binet, their papers, Selling Creativity Short and the Long and Short of It. Both of those papers urge brands, our clients, to balance the long and short-term level of investment on campaigns. And also at Cannes Lions in 2019, Peter presented The Crisis in Creative Effectiveness. That was the latest research which explored the drivers of creative effectiveness. These are all great sources for us to be able to quantify and put down the performance measures of what measures creativity. This particular slide I wanted to include because it will appeal to those that want to see like data. It's from the collaboration between McKinsey and Cannes Lions. Now, Cannes, as we know, the Cannes Lions are the International Festival of Creativity, and is the best of the best globally. And the Award Creativity Score Index, the ACS, was created as a result of the collaboration with McKinsey's management consultancy, where they explored the link between creativity and business performance. And as this graph shows, the companies that performed well on the ACS, on the ACS score, so the Awards Creativity Score Index, 67% outstanding performance on organic growth of revenue, 70% of those with creative awards on total return to shareholders, and 74% saw a growth in their profit. It's proof again that creativity does actually move the needle in business growth. Another insight out of the McKinsey's report that I spotted was that these results also show that the fastest growing companies are really strong at developing new products, services, and business models, which is another reason why I'm rolling out these webinars. You have an opportunity in your business to create your own business model here, your value-based pricing models, your VBPs. And that stands you apart from the sea of sameness of other agencies who are continuing to use the drop-down menus of the hourly rates, the markup, and the margins. It's a choice you have, and everyone wants to do it. It's a matter of putting a framework around it, put a time frame on it, have someone to own it internally, use all of this information that we have, and create your own, and you'll get better and better as you repeat and improve. You might have seen this last year. It was launched in June at Cannes. It's a collaboration between Cannes Lions and WARC. WARC is a global data analytics company. And the Creative Effectiveness Ladder came out of research of thousands of Cannes Lion Award winners and the WARC database, mostly advertising and marketing campaigns and spend, delivering a ladder we can use to look at and assess the creative effectiveness on a hierarchy of 1 to 6, least impact to the most impactful. Now, climbing the creative ladder is all about brand building and commercial results. So to achieve a 6, the enduring icon, you would need to probably commit to creative commitment for about 3 years plus and track measuring performance, your sales and brand metrics. So this is where we lead to the next, like what sort of metrics? Like what are you talking about? I've got so much, where would I start? So I guess when we say something's being effective, we're looking at, I guess, a pyramid like this, which has come out of that same report between WARC and Cannes Lion. It's a really nice diagram that you could use or create something of your own that works with your agency, where you've got campaign metrics, brand and behavioral metrics, brand loyalty, awareness, how much awareness does the public have to recognize your brand, perceived quality associated with the brand triggers, maybe even proprietary assets like patents and trademarks, or relationships and distribution outlets that your client has with their partners and so on. It's not rocket science. It's just a very simple device that might help you identify what the effectiveness measures might be. Now, the commercial metrics sitting at the top of the pyramid here is predominantly about the dollars, where we start to look at some hard metrics. So moving on to the financial value of the framework, it is a little tricky. I live in this space, and I generally find there's 3 main problems that an agency will have when we're trying to set financial metrics. The first one is there's so many. There's such a plethora of different metrics. Which ones would I use? So if we went back to that triangle, the pyramid, or you create your own device, a model, you just want to start small. Just put a few. And I'll give you some suggestions shortly. So which ones? Also, you need to ask your client, which ones are the measures that they're looking at for their business growth? Then the second issue we tend to have at the moment is this big data, huge volume of data, clicks and likes and shares, etc. I mean, it's so copious, we actually don't really know what we're looking at sometimes. But guess what? The client probably doesn't either. And if they do, then you need to learn from them. Vice versa, if you do, then they need to learn from you. It's a partnership. Together, you're going to work out which of the data sources are we going to use to measure what. The third issue that we tend to have is that we've got such a number of, I guess, areas within the client's business of sensitive data that we cannot access, that they may not have the authority to access. So they're not able to share it with you. So if they're a private company, it can be challenging because really difficult for them if they can't get access to growth metrics. But if it's a listed company, we should be able to achieve that by looking at their financial statements, which would be online as a listed company. We can also set some of these financial metrics ourselves. So if the client doesn't have it, then we can create them, and then we can suggest these are the things they should be looking at. Again, a little later on one of the slides, I'm going to show you some of the best brands in the world, what they're measuring, and you can use those as examples. So really, what are we measuring? Where are we going? Where would we start? It's about the commercial growth, which both parties are aiming to achieve, efficiency and impact. So efficiency might be market share growth, extra share of voice. Impact might be something like volume, sales, revenue and profit, the harder ones, return on investment, marketing return on investment. But really, which metrics? You have to ask your client. You're going to need them to tell you which metrics are important to them. And on that job, what's important for that particular job as well. And with a consultative partnership mindset, together, you're going to work to define performance and agree the metrics and keep it small. You don't need it to be 1,000 things that are unmanageable. As I'll show you on the next slide, you'll see there's often just one or two key metrics that says it all. And then below that, you can again cascade down and get deeper and deeper as you get better, or the clients have a number of measures that they're looking to assess impact. But ask them what's important to them and their stakeholders. So beyond your client direct contact, what's important to their CFO, what's important to their CEO, the shareholders. You can go wide on this as depending on the client you pick and depending on the actual campaign or the job you're working on. So here are some typical examples of what financial value could look like. For example, 70% up in 6 years, 1 million in 5 months of profit, value increases, 80 million over 2.5 years, market share rose from 1% to 4%. Really quite simple, just keep it small, but behind it, we've obviously got bulk data that we've got and we've been tracking it for 5 months or 2 years. This is the proposition that you're creating to roll to your client. This is what success looks like from their perspective. And you can't lie with this. It's going to be hard facts that you're going to collate, and you need to start somewhere. I want to point you to an awesome case study, which is just published by Cannes Lions, really to help you assess how a client can actually verbalize back to you about value. Data like this on a slide or a presentation deck is great, but being creative agencies, why don't you record it? And here's a really good example from the Snickers "You're Not Hungry When You're Hungry" advert and campaign, which started in 2010, so it's been going for 10 years. Let's take a look and hear how the client speaks about their campaign.
In 2010, Snickers launched a new campaign with a Super Bowl ad in the US, and it was an instant success. It not only rejuvenated the brand, but it became a global platform, activated in more than 70 countries worldwide.
Shut up, Mom!
You must be supermodels. What do you model, gloves?
Sweetheart, I left my phone in... I'm having phone issues. Bye.
Pete.
Come on, man. What? We said pantyhose, right?
Zip it, shrimpy.
Can you feel that? That's not what your girlfriend said.
Baby. Eat a Snickers. Better? Better.
So as you can see, this is one way to actually show. The MD actually then talks a little bit more about those metrics, and he will show you that for an investment of $85,000 on the original campaign, which was to make stickers more relevant again, they delivered $850 worth of attention for the brand. That's 10x. That's what we're talking about. So it's about 150 Aussie just for the original campaign. And it's continued to grow over 10 years because of the success. Over 70 countries they've activated this. They all have this is a BBDO agency, and The BBDO agencies across those 70 countries were able to create their own local version. It went right across pack design, as you can see on the side. Every time, it was quite an extensive campaign that I guess is one of the best examples I could find for you that you could watch to see how you could report in a video compilation. I think the Can line video of this shows the agency and the clients, goes for about 10-15 minutes, and throughout they use data to show just across the screen the videos of the actual product. It's a really nice way to include that in your proposition, in your value proposition, that you will be at the end delivering I guess a video of the results. And of course, you'll always have to put it in writing as well. So up 16%, 47 Can Line awards this brand made as a result of their campaign. You're not hungry when you're hungry. It's indisputably one of the globe's best examples that I can encourage you to look at. But if you're not sure where to start, then I've created this little commercial impact matrix, and it's pretty simple. You can add to this whatever you would like to add. Essentially, what we're trying to do is show an increased position or a reduction of something from the client's perspective, improve the client's position, or create something for the client. So an increased, reduction, improvement, or creation. Think again of maybe 3 dimensions here of a soft, medium, and hard metric that you might use to assess the value, the commercial impact. So a soft one might be something like, we wish to improve the client's process. Something a little bit medium, a metric might be around maybe retention or efficiency. And definitely the hard metrics would be more like your financial targets, so your revenue and your profit, volume of growth, market share, and the like. So you would work with your client to, you have to participate on this together to identify, start with a matrix like this or bigger, and then circle the ones that your client is interested in, what their CEO, their CFO, etc., wants to know. What does business growth, financial value, and commercial impact mean to them? And then maybe look at 3 levels. You might just start with 1 level, keep it simple to start with, and then you might go further. So if this is a campaign that might last for 2-3 years, you might just start looking at 1 soft, 1 medium, 1 hard in the first year, and then maybe 2 in the second and the third year. So again, you can grow that. Part of you developing a VBP framework is to understand how is it going to roll, what's it going to look like. And any result that exceeds the agreed outcome is the value add for which you want to be compensated for. So let's have a look at some pricing models and see how you could probably start to suggest how would you be paid for that incremental value. Now, the models that I'm going to present here, it's just a device that I've created internally, again, just to get you thinking. The hourly rates is what we all have. We have job management solutions. It's the way the industry has been born and continues to work. We're the sea of sameness here. Everybody does the same thing. We all have the same lament. There's a huge conflict of interest between agency and client, where the clients don't want to really pay for all those hours. You want to increase the hours if there are overruns, and the risk of you not getting paid for the value that you've delivered is high. So moving through varying degrees of risk through some, I guess, packaging and bundling, products and templates, an area of efficiency where you're capitalizing on how efficient you've been able to be at your agency, then into positioning, which is the ROI space that Nicola and I are talking about particularly today. So the return on the investment, your value pricing. This 6 o'clock spoke is probably one of the easiest, might be scariest because you've not done it before, but like anything, get the experts, get your coaches around you, make sure you can understand it first before you roll it. It is probably one of the easiest ways to implement a value-based pricing model, where you look at that incremental value and take a percentage of the return on investment. Continuing on through innovation, so looking at intellectual property and impact, potentially even looking at equity as a way to be compensated. These are all options available to you, and you might have some other suggestions as well. The models that I've just shown you are some examples of how you might create something yourself in your framework internally. What does it look like at your agency? And it all starts with you. You need to commit to this. You got to say, yes, we can do this. So whether it's your next brand ID or brand naming, TVC, or a PR campaign or social media campaign job that you've got, your role is to come up with great ideas and deliver exceptional results, huge impact. Now, depending on the agency and client relationship that you have, will allow you, if you have the right client, to propose a value-based pricing model. And it will depend on that shared understanding of what is a great idea, agreed metrics to assess that evidence to evaluate. So evaluating that impact and growth, you have to pick a client that you believe you can make a difference on this particular job, and that they're going to be open to it, and that they have access to or some awareness of metrics, and start where you are right now. You won't have all the answers. So together, you're going to roll out your framework, and you're going to work with the client, and you're going to start to work through these different components with the consultancy mindset, defining performance, and rolling and introducing your compensation pricing model. So really breaking away from the hourly rate, still using that potentially as one of the, say, 3 options. You put three concepts on the table for a client. I also recommend you put 3 pricing models down. And one of them will be the classic that they're used to. One of them might be a bundle or package for something that they might like down the track that they should buy now. And definitely the value-based pricing model that we're advocating and trying to encourage you to embrace. So what's next? Let's say we take a deep breath and we go, all right, we're going to get started. Bite-sized baby steps. Let's go for 3 months. So next month, you're going to start working on the framework. You've identified somebody in your organization that's going to champion this, and you've selected a hot group that can actually meet together, use that non-billable time, or come in for an hour before breakfast before work, meet online after work, wherever it is, work out how you're going to create your own framework. Decide the metrics that would be appropriate for the type of work your agency delivers to your clients, looking at that creative and financial elements of effectiveness and value. And then how does the compensation model look like for you? What are you going to offer your clients? What are you proposing? So by the next 3 months, you probably have your first draft of this and you might be ready to roll. Remember, it's baby steps, and you might not get it right first go, but you must give it a go if you're interested in moving ahead from the sea of sameness of yesterday. I'm going to leave you with this last example, a bit of a motivating story that I really love. It's a famous story that some of you will know. It started back in 1971 with a little baby step where Phil Knight paid $35 to get an image on the side of his shoe. He made 400 shoes to start with, a little running shoe. Fast forward 50 years and the swoosh brand continues to grow from strength to strength. It's currently valued at $34.8 billion. So rather than $2 an hour for 17 and a half hours, the hourly rate model that Carolyn Davidson, the designer, charged Phil Knight, perhaps she could have asked for a percentage of revenues. Even a 0.01% or a 0.001% would equate to millions of dollars rather than her $35 that she got paid. The point here is that 50 years ago, the hourly rate model was being used. 50 years on, we're still using the hourly rate method. Clearly, this business worth $34.8 billion, that $35 was worth a whole lot more. There's a value, and that has consistently increased in value of that particular logo. So if you start now as a baby step of a small amount, but maybe taking a percentage clip rather than the hourly rates, you too might actually generate great returns in the end. Just to cap that story off, a decade later, so in the 80s, Phil Knight did actually throw a surprise party for Carolyn Davidson to acknowledge her and reward her for her contribution in the incredible growth of Nike because of that swoosh recognized globally. And they gifted her a diamond ring, which was a little swoosh, and 500 Nike shares. The 500 shares of Nike stock today is worth about $2.5 million. So, she has actually been rewarded, that lovely designer, rather than the $35. And again, you will also find if you've got the right client, it's a win-win. Both parties are going to be elated when you move the needle of business growth beyond the expected to something extraordinary, as we have seen in the Nike example. But don't be nervous. If you don't really think you've totally got this, let us help you. We are presenting this to you today, Nicola and I, because we know what to do and we are able to help you, to guide you through as external consultants to help you. So I'm going to pass back to Nicola, and perhaps you can explain a little bit about what would be next for the agencies to work with you, Nicola.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Kathryn. So look, we know that there's a lot here that we've spoken about that is new. So we have 2 half-day workshops that can also be combined as a full day. The first half-day workshop is really giving you a sense of how to approach these briefs in the fashion that I've spoken about, more application of design thinking to creative solutions that you might be considering. Like many MBA courses, like Omnicom University, it is a case study based program. So I will take a live case study of a client and work with you to explain blow by blow how we shifted that client's expectation for what the solution needed to be, how we got that solution sold in with her extended stakeholder group, how we then went about solving it and executing it. And I think it's a really great story. They came to us thinking that they had a brand architecture problem, and that wasn't the problem at all. The problem was, in fact, that their proposition wasn't matching up with what they actually were able to offer and what, in fact, the clients were asking for. So it was quite a pivot from the brief. As well as going through that, so really outlining a methodology and applying it to a case study. There will also be time at the end of that half-day session for you to bring lifetime potential opportunities that you have with your clients, and we will brainstorm about how to open up that possibility or any roadblocks that you're experiencing in any of these discussions. So if that's the first half of the day, the second half of the day is concentrating on the model that you might apply. Kathryn, over to you.
Yes, that's right. So my role is to help you design your own bespoke value-based pricing framework on creative effectiveness, financial value metrics, and the compensation modelling, and how they integrate with your existing job management solution, and how would your team roll it out, and do your client agency contracts represent that. So liberating you from the hourly rate, giving you clarity on how you would present it, and the confidence to roll it with a real live client. So you could do half day with Nicola and a follow-up half day with myself, or separate times. We haven't really decided what would work best for you. So you'll let us know what you want. I might now turn it over to Q&A. We've got quite a few questions that have come through during the session. So let me just start with the first one. It's actually a question for you, Nicola, that says, who are the people that you usually work with that have the necessary skills to focus on the 10x value potentially delivered on a brief? Is it the Chief Strategy Officer? I guess this is from the agency side. So who at the agency do you usually work with?
So who at the agency? Look, I think the person who is best placed within your businesses to support with this sort of an approach is the person that might traditionally have the responsibility of translating the information between the client and the creative teams, because they're the ones that are very good at asking all those questions in the first place. Now, depending on the shape of your agency, that might be a managing director, it might be a chief strategy officer, it might be a creative director, it might be somebody who's just a really great, empathetic, active listener that you want to have in that room and really interrogate in a gentle way to get all of the details. It's going to be different in every agency, but definitely the skill set required is active listening and reframing problems so that the client leaves the conversation with an awareness of potential rather than a very fixed, closed frame of reference.
Yeah, good answer. And I think that also, underlines what we were saying earlier. Who is it in your organisation that will champion this? This is a long-term project, which should take you 3 to 6 months to actually iron out and then be ready if you're not already using. So some of you might have already had one of those big hairy ass goals that you put it out there and the clients have said yes to the big price, but you don't have a strategy or a process internally to repeat it. So, pick that person and have that person work with Nicola. There's actually another one, Nicola, about did big players such as Interbrand and Deloitte use rate card or value-based pricing models?
Yeah, great question. Deloitte absolutely use value-based pricing. And I think a good way to think about this, and I was reading the questions whilst you were speaking, Kathryn, so I've had a little chance to think this through. I think the more business-oriented your context, the more recognition of the importance of value-based pricing. The more creative your context, the bigger leap this is going to make. So Deloitte has got a lot of business folk in it, and they are all about value-based pricing. And in fact, I would encourage you, with so many smart people in that business, to dig around and read some of their points of view on value-based pricing, because there's some great resources that they make publicly available. Interbrand, I feel like it was a new conversation, and I should also just make reference to the triangular graph that Kathryn showed. So Deloitte are very much playing in that commercial metrics, the top of that pinnacle. There's a lot of business-oriented, financially oriented people in that business, so there's always somebody to ask about how to structure a fee there. Interbrand, I think, was playing much more in that mid-tier, which is around the brand metrics. Whilst we weren't doing pure value, we absolutely were doing tiered pricing based on results. So there was still incentive, and the client is always happy. I guarantee any client is going to be happy to pay less for work that does less, and to pay more for work that does more. So I think even if we think about it in those simple terms, structuring your payment on the basis of results is an easy conversation to have, I guarantee you. I think the other thing, just to really make clear in your minds as you're thinking about this, is where the risk sits. So hourly rate, there is no risk to you. Value-based pricing, there is risk to you, but the reward can be greater. So it's also about your risk appetite, and it's about your client's risk appetite. As Kathryn said, there are a multitude of models to get from here to here, and I think it should be dependent on every situation and every problem for you to decide what is right. Fundamentally, if you don't think you can make a difference, do not go for value-based pricing, because you're not going to win. So use a range of options depending on the risk appetite and your belief in the potential. And you can always structure that remuneration equals rewards, even if that's just different banding of price.
Yeah, great answer. And it kind of lends itself to two more questions that I've spotted in the Q&A. So one of them is about the industry engagements are moving to project-based work as opposed to that longer-term engagement, and the fact that the CMO tenure is less than 2 years. So how do we reconcile that with recommendations to measure the long-term performance in metrics and brand value? And there was another question directly after that from someone else about financial measures that are multi-year. So how do we earn and realise the value earlier? So I'm going to start, and then I might pass over to you, Nicola, to think about that. We're talking about the long term. And as I said, for the creative effectiveness ladder, it's a 3-year plus measuring sales and brand effectiveness. So this is part of your framework and your model. So if you've got a client or a campaign or a job you're doing that's only for a year, you need to think about your financial reward for that in a year. If you're able to work with a client and you have seen evidence of historic working with clients for 3 years plus, then you should be talking to them in your proposal, your remuneration proposal, for 3-year measures, quarterly measures, half-yearly measures, annual measures, and more frequently. But this is all part of what you want to propose. So although the industry is experiencing this short-termism, you might also be able to deliver a value-based proposition for that short-termism. You need to create a framework. It's not also for every single job, for every single client, for every single agency. On that value price wheel model that I created, and as Nicola just said, you don't have to do this for the longer term. It might just be you've capitalised and moved around the risk a little bit to productising, or maybe you're licensing. So there are different ways that you can address the fact that you're finding that the industry, but let's just look at your agency and your clients, are moving to shorter term engagements and try to realise that value earlier.
If I can add to that, yeah, look, I actually think it's really, you know, if we're talking about long-term brand health data, I can understand then that a retained model is going to make it easier for you to apply growth over a longer period of time. But my assumption is, as a retained service, you will actually be answering a whole variety of different kinds of briefs. Some of them might be ATL, some of them might be BTL, and therefore they're going to have really different metrics. I would view project-based working as a benefit in that respect, because it gives you the opportunity to negotiate more specific criteria for each opportunity. And once you've started living in this space and really interrogating your clients about what great looks like for them and what needs to be true for success to happen, you realize very quickly that what you need to prioritize in different briefs become vastly different. So project-based is neat in that you have a bespoke set of criteria, and you get to really interrogate in every opportunity what great looks like. You're not making assumptions about what the client is expecting to see. In respect to that point around a 2-year tenure for CMO, the CMO has KPIs. What are they? And how can you pin your work to those KPIs? Because they will be on the time frame that they're looking to invest in that role. So again, this is about having really great detailed conversations with your clients to really understand what it is that they're looking for you to really, how they want you to make change and where they want you to make change. The more granular these conversations are, the better your understanding of what needs to be done is, and therefore the better chance you have of making real impact.
Yeah, I'll just extend on that answer actually. At Mumbrella 360 last year and the year before, there were panelist sessions that talked about CMO to CEO. So if any of you attended those sessions, you will understand that a CMO, to progress through an organisation, needs to be able to provide these metrics, soft, hard, and anything in between, creative, financial, so they can actually move up through their organisation and get a place at the board. And it is entirely possible. So I actually think, and it's putting it out there a little bit, if you're able to work with your CMOs and provide them with this sort of information, you're going to make them look great. They're going to look great to their stakeholders, their CFO, their CEO. The tenure might actually be a little longer, and they'll start to rise out of that role into C-suite, sitting at board and becoming CEO. So it's a long lead game, but the more we can educate our clients, our CMOs, the better it's going to be for us as an industry, because that side of the equation, that our partners are going to understand what it is we're all trying to achieve.
And just to even one further add on that, if I may, a 2-year tenure means that person has identified a lot of low-hanging fruit. Low-hanging fruit is great. It's easy to move. And the more, to Kathryn's point, the better you make that person look, the more they're going to trust you. And if they're a 2-year kind of CMO, you've got a lot of low-hanging fruit to help with as they jump from business to business to business, if you've done your job well and understood what it is that they want to really achieve in their tenure.
Fantastic. We've got a couple of minutes left, so I'm just going to pick one of the questions that I can see in the Q&A, which is, how does this apply to, not the big campaigns, but maybe more a delivery-based service? And I think Nicola and I both kind of answered this a little bit, in as much as there are a variety of different financial compensation models. It doesn't have to be a massive incremental. I mean, even attendance to this webinar, Nicola and I had an estimate of numbers that we thought might be possible. So if you're in a delivery-based service, you might have how many clicks or how many likes or how many, what is the reach. So for the individual campaign, this is entirely relevant. All of this is relevant. It might not be the big market share growth that we quoted, or the earnings per share, or the value in stock price. It might not be that for this particular client that you'd be working your framework on. Just pick something, start small, and then you can grow from there.
And there's
Great.
a great question there, Kathryn, we might just have time to answer quickly, which is around decisions that clients make where the metrics are beyond your control.
Yeah.
And I think Nikki, who has asked that question, you need to be really, really clear of what you can control. It's like life, really, isn't it? Know what you can control and know what you can't, and really set your metrics around the things you can control. But in the things that you can't control, you have an opportunity to explain to your client the implications, which, if that client trusts you, will give you further reach into their organisation to influence the way those metrics are executed. So you can limit where your metrics sit, or you can use it as an opportunity to expand more deeply into the way they're executing.
Amazing. Well, we're right on 1:30, so I'm going to close the webinar for today. Thank you so much for attending. Thank you very much, Nicola, and hope you can join us for ones in future. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.